The day started just like any other in the sprawling cityscape where I lived. That morning, as the sun cast a golden hue over the bustling streets, I stepped out of my apartment into the familiar chaos of urban life. The air was filled with the cacophony of honking cars, the distant murmur of conversation, and the rhythmic footsteps of the city's inhabitants, all merging into the symphony that was my daily backdrop. As I navigated through the crowded sidewalks, my mind preoccupied with the day's schedule, something unusual caught my eye. It was a small copper penny, lying tails up on the concrete. The sight momentarily halted my brisk pace. I remembered my grandmother's voice, tinged with the superstitions of her generation, whispering about the luck of pennies. She would always say, "Find a penny, pick it up, and all day long, you'll have good luck. But only if it's heads up." I had always found such notions charming, but ultimately frivolous. With a brief shake of my head and a dismissive chuckle, I left the penny lying there, its face hidden against the sidewalk. I continued on my way, engulfed once again in the flow of the morning crowd, the penny already slipping from my mind. However, the day's events began to unfold in an unexpectedly troublesome manner. It started with a simple mishap, my hand trembling slightly as I took a sip of coffee, leading to a conspicuous stain blooming across my white shirt. This was just moments before I was due to lead an important meeting. I remember standing in the restroom, dabbing at the stain with a wad of paper towels, feeling a twinge of irritation. The meeting that followed felt unusually challenging. My thoughts, typically clear and organized, seemed to swirl chaotically. My words stumbled over each other, leaving me feeling exposed and off balance in front of my peers. Later, as I hurried to catch the bus, it pulled away just as I reached the stop, its taillights blurring into the distance. Then, in what felt like a cruel twist of fate, my usually reliable car groaned and shuddered to a halt in the midst of traffic, eliciting a symphony of honks and frustrated shouts from the sea of cars trapped behind me. By evening, as I sat in the dim light of my apartment, the day's frustrations replayed in my mind like a broken record. The coffee stain, the botched meeting, the missed bus, the broken-down car, they all seemed to weave together into a tapestry of misfortune. And then, uninvited, the image of the penny surfaced in my thoughts. Could there be a connection? Was it possible that such a small act of dismissing a superstition could have tangible consequences? The rational part of me scoffed at the idea, yet the events of the day had planted a seed of doubt. The more I tried to dismiss it, the more it seemed to grow, casting a shadow over my thoughts. In the days that followed, this streak of bad luck persisted. Documents went missing at work, leading to missed deadlines and strained discussions with my colleagues. Each incident, in isolation, was manageable, but together, they formed a pattern that was hard to ignore. Sleep became elusive, and I would often find myself staring at the ceiling, the image of the penny burning in my mind's eye. Lying there, in the stillness of my room, the hum of the city a distant lullaby, I couldn't help but wonder if my decision to leave the penny tails up had somehow invited this unrelenting string of misfortune into my life. In the weeks following the penny incident, my life seemed to unfurl like a thread pulled from a tightly woven fabric. Each day brought with it an air of trepidation, a sense of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was as if the city, once a backdrop to my structured life, had taken on a more sinister role, casting shadows where once there was light. I found myself waking up each morning with a knot in my stomach. The routine of getting ready for work, which used to be performed with robotic efficiency, now felt like a Herculean effort. My reflection in the mirror seemed to mock me, the eyes looking back carrying a hint of fear that was foreign to me. My walk to work, once a time for planning my day, became a gauntlet of anxiety. The city streets, alive with the hustle and bustle of daily commuters, seemed to whisper secrets as I passed. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being followed. One crisp morning, as I made my way through a shortcut in the park, my heart skipped a beat. There, on a weathered wooden bench, lay another penny. Its tail side was up, catching the glint of the morning sun, and it seemed to be waiting for me. I stopped dead in my tracks, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. It was irrational, I knew, but the sight of that penny reignited the fear that had been simmering inside me. I hurried past it, resisting the urge to look back, as if the penny had eyes that bore into my back. At work, I became a shadow of my former self. Reports were filled with errors, meetings were missed, and my once promising projects faltered under my distracted guidance. My colleagues' expressions morphed from concern to wariness. I overheard hushed conversations, speculations about my well-being. I wanted to scream that it wasn't my fault, that something beyond my understanding was at play. But how could I explain it when I didn't fully comprehend it myself? My social life, once a source of joy and relaxation, crumbled to dust. Invitations to after-work drinks or weekend get-togethers were declined with vague excuses. I saw the disappointment in my friends' eyes, the confusion at my sudden withdrawal. But I couldn't risk it. What if this curse, for lack of a better word, was contagious? What if my presence brought them bad luck too? The pennies continued to appear in my path, always tails up, always when I was alone. It was as if they were a personal message, a reminder of the invisible force that had upended my life. They turned up in the most improbable places, nestled in the crevice of a sidewalk, perched on the edge of my office desk, even inside my apartment. Each sighting sent a shiver down my spine, a visceral reminder of my ongoing plight. Nights were the worst. The solitude of my apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on me, the silence punctuated by the ticking of the clock, each second a reminder of my descent into this personal hell. Sleep eluded me, and when it did come, it was fitful and filled with nightmares of falling pennies, an endless cascade that buried me in darkness. It was during one such sleepless night, as I sat on my couch staring blankly at the muted TV, that a desperate plan began to form in my mind. The penny, the root of all this. I had to find it. I had to flip it heads up and end this madness. It was a ludicrous idea, born out of sheer desperation, but it was all I had left. My decision to find the penny, that minuscule harbinger of chaos, marked the beginning of a descent into an obsession that would consume me. My once orderly life had unraveled, leaving me a shell of my former self, haunted by the constant specter of misfortune. The city, with its towering buildings and endless streets, transformed into a vast hunting ground for my futile quest. Days blended into nights as I scoured the city. My search was relentless, taking me through dimly lit alleys, abandoned lots, and the forgotten corners of urban decay. I pored over every inch of pavement, every gutter, every nook where that accursed penny might hide. The city's cacophony faded into a distant echo as my focus narrowed to the singular task at hand. I became a familiar figure in the less traveled parts of the city, my disheveled appearance and frantic mutterings drawing wary glances from passers-by. Shopkeepers and street vendors watched with a mixture of pity and suspicion as I sifted through their change, desperately searching for that one penny. My apartment became nothing more than a place to rest briefly before resuming my search. The walls were adorned with maps of the city, marked with the locations of each penny I found and turned over, each one a false hope, a cruel joke. The floor was littered with piles of pennies, all heads up, their copper faces gleaming mockingly in the dim light. Then, on a day that was no different from the rest, my trembling hands unearthed a penny from beneath a pile of damp leaves in a neglected park. My heart leapt as I picked it up, its head side shining up at me. A rush of relief flooded through me, so intense it almost brought me to my knees. Could this be the end of my torment? I clutched the penny tightly, as if it were a lifeline, and made my way home, a flicker of hope igniting within me. But as I walked, the familiar feeling of dread crept back in. Back in my apartment, the sense of being watched became overwhelming. The walls appeared to close in, the air filled with an unspoken threat. The pennies scattered around me seemed to pulse, their presence a constant reminder of the curse that refused to be lifted. My job, once a beacon of stability, was now a distant memory. Friends and family, unable to reach me through the fog of my obsession, fell away one by one. My world shrank to the confines of my cluttered apartment, where I sat among the sea of pennies, each one a testament to my madness. As my mental and physical health deteriorated, the line between reality and nightmare began to blur. The whispers grew louder, their words now clear. They spoke of doom, of a curse that would never be lifted, of a fate sealed by a simple, thoughtless act. In the end, I was alone, surrounded by the metallic glint of pennies, their faces staring up at me with cold indifference. The apartment was a tomb of my own making, a prison for a mind lost to superstition and fear. I was a captive to the curse, unable to escape the grip of the penny that had, in my mind, come to life with a malevolent will of its own. The story of Theodore, the man who defied a superstition and paid the price, became a whispered legend in the city. They say that on quiet nights, you can still hear the sound of pennies clinking, a mournful reminder of a life consumed by fear. And so, the curse lives on, waiting for its next victim. Somewhere in the city, a penny lies tails up, its presence unnoticed by the hurried feet that pass by. But for the one who stops, who takes a moment to ponder its significance, a new chapter of the curse begins.